The sky turned crimson at exactly 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Not the gentle crimson of sunset, but an angry, unnatural red that made your skin crawl. I was walking home from work when everyone around me froze, eyes locked upward as massive ships materialized through the clouds. They weren't like anything we'd seen in movies. No sleek metal discs or glowing orbs. These were living structures, pulsing with what looked like veins, stretching for miles across the sky. The first blast hit downtown. I felt the shockwave before I heard it, a pressure wave that knocked people off their feet and shattered every window for blocks. The screaming began seconds later. Those of us who could run did. They've been watching us for years, the old scientist on TV explained during the emergency broadcast that night. Her hands shook as satellite images showed identical ships appearing simultaneously over every major city worldwide. They've studied our defenses, our technologies, our weaknesses. This attack was meticulously planned. Our military response was immediate but futile. Fighter jets launched only to be swatted from the sky like insects. Missiles disappeared mid-flight, disintegrated before impact. By dawn the next day, governments worldwide had issued surrender statements. But something odd happened on day 3 of the invasion. The alien ships, which had been systematically destroying military installations, suddenly paused. Their devastating weapons fell silent. Communication attempts from our side went unanswered as always, but the assault had definitely stopped. I was part of a civilian evacuation when I met Dr. Chun. Unlike everyone else heading for the countryside, she was traveling toward the nearest hovering ship, equipment strapped to her back. They made a mistake, she told me when I asked why she wasn't fleeing. I've been analyzing their attack patterns. There's something they clearly don't understand about Earth. Dr. Chun had worked in environmental microbiology before the invasion. These beings, she explained as we walked, they're not attacking randomly. They're surgical, precise, avoiding certain areas entirely. At first, I thought they were preserving resources, but then I realized they're avoiding water. It was true. Despite controlling the skies, not one ship had positioned itself over oceans, lakes, or major rivers. The aliens' ground forces, biomechanical creatures that moved with frightening speed, refused to cross even small streams. I think they're here for our planet, Dr. Chen whispered, but they have no idea how much of it is covered in water. Earth is 70% ocean. It's our defining feature in the solar system. How could advanced beings not know this? As we reached a vantage point overlooking the nearest ship, we saw something that confirmed her theory. The massive vessel was developing strange patches on its surface, spreading discolorations that looked remarkably like rust or mold. Below it, the ground was damp from recent rain. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. They're not immune to something here. Something basic, something so common to us that we never considered it could be a weapon. She turned to me, hope breaking across her face for the first time. They can cross galaxies, but they might be powerless against the simplest element on our planet. A deafening screech erupted from the ship above us, making the ground tremble. The sound was nothing mechanical, it was organic, agonized, as if the ship itself was in pain. The ship's agonized cry echoed across the valley, sending birds scattering into the darkening sky. Dr. Chun grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a concrete barrier just as a patrol of those biomechanical creatures rounded the corner. They moved like nothing I'd ever seen, half insect, half machine, with too many limbs that clicked against the pavement. We held our breath as they passed, their faceless heads swiveling in jerky motions. "We need to get a sample," Dr. Chun whispered once they moved on. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were focused, determined. If water is causing that reaction, we need to understand why. It might be our only chance. I've been a high school chemistry teacher before the world fell apart 3 days ago. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this moment. Hiding in the shadow of an alien vessel with humanity's future possibly hinging on what we discovered next. But I nodded anyway. What choice did we have? We made our way toward a drainage ditch where runoff from the morning's rain had pooled beneath the edge of the ship. The discoloration was worse here, spreading patches of what looked like corrosion eating through the living metal of the vessel. It reminded me of rust, but faster, more aggressive, almost like a bacterial growth. Before the invasion, I was studying extremophiles. Dr. Chun explained as she carefully collected samples in small vials. Microorganisms that survive in conditions that would kill most life forms. Earth has billions of species of bacteria and microbes that evolved here over billions of years. I kept watch while she worked, scanning for more patrols. You think our bacteria are attacking them? Like War of the Worlds? Maybe not exactly like that, but similar principle. These aliens might be completely unprepared for Earth's microbial life. Their biology could be fundamentally incompatible with ours. A memory surfaced, something about NASA sterilizing spacecraft before sending them to Mars to prevent contamination. If we took those precautions just traveling to another planet in our own solar system, what about beings from another star system entirely? The ground suddenly shook beneath us as the ship above shifted position. A piece of its outer surface, about the size of a car, sloughed off and crashed down nearby, sizzling when it hit the wet ground. The piece continued to decay before our eyes, breaking down into an iridescent sludge. Dr. Chun moved toward it despite my attempts to hold her back. "This is incredible," she breathed, carefully collecting more samples. "Their technology appears to be partly biological. I think our water, or something in it, is breaking down their molecular structure." That's when we heard the voices, human voices. From the darkness emerged a small group of people wearing makeshift protective gear. Their leader, a tall woman with a weather-beaten face and military bearing, approached us cautiously. "I'm Colonel Reeves," she said. "We've been monitoring these ships since they arrived. Looks like you too made the same discovery we did." Dr. Chun straightened. "You know about the water?" The colonel nodded grimly. "Not just water. It's what's in it. Ordinary bacteria, the kind that's everywhere on Earth. These things came ready for our weapons, our technology, even our atmosphere. But they have no defense against our microbial life." She gestured for us to follow her group into a concealed entrance, what looked like an old maintenance tunnel. "We've assembled a team. Scientists, military, whoever survived with useful skills. We're setting up underground, away from their sensors." As we descended into the tunnel, the colonel's voice dropped lower. "There's something else you should see. Something we found when one of their ground soldiers died." She led us into a chamber where a covered form lay on a metal table. With a grim expression, she pulled back the sheet, revealing the alien beneath. I felt my blood freeze in my veins. The creature was humanoid, too humanoid, and embedded in its chest was something that looked disturbingly familiar, something that shouldn't be possible. "Is that?" Dr. Chun couldn't finish the question. The colonel nodded slowly. "Yes, human DNA. These aren't just aliens. They've been here before." The silence in the underground chamber felt suffocating as we all stared at the alien corpse with its impossible human DNA. My mind raced with questions I was afraid to ask. How is this possible? Dr. Chin finally broke the silence, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. She leaned closer to examine the creature without touching it. "This suggests they've been taking genetic samples from Earth for who knows how long." Colonel Reeves nodded grimly. "That's our working theory. But there's more." She gestured to another team member who stepped forward with a tablet. On it was a satellite image from just before the invasion began. This was captured by one of our deep space monitoring stations 3 days ago. The image showed hundreds of ships approaching Earth, but something else caught my eye, a structure in Earth's orbit that definitely wasn't one of our satellites or the space station. "That's been there for at least 15 years, said the colonel, cloaked from most detection methods. "We only spotted it when the invasion fleet approached, and it briefly decloaked to signal them." Dr. Chin shook her head in disbelief. "They've been watching us, studying us, preparing." "Not just watching," said a new voice. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Patel. I was with SETI before all this. We think they've been influencing us." He pulled up another image, a historical timeline of technological development on Earth over the past century. "See these spikes? Transistors, microprocessors, genetic engineering, quantum computing. all major leaps that happened faster than natural development curves would predict. My throat went dry. You're saying they've been guiding our tech development? Colonel Reeves' face hardened. Farming us. Like you'd cultivate a field before harvest. We think they've been steering our technological evolution towards specific goals. But why? I asked. And why attack now? Dr. Patel adjusted his glasses. We think they needed us to reach a certain technological threshold. Perhaps to develop something they need. Something worth coming all this way for. The colonel led us deeper into the facility through corridors that looked like they belonged to an old military bunker. People hurried back and forth, a mix of military personnel and civilians working with shared purpose. We've gathered about 80 people here, she explained. Scientists, engineers, doctors, military, anyone with skills that might help us understand and fight back. There are other pockets of resistance forming around the world. We've established limited communication. We entered what looked like a makeshift lab. In the center sat a large tank filled with cloudy water, and floating in it was another piece of the alien ship. Watch, said Dr. Patel. He added a dropper of liquid to the tank, and immediately the alien material began to bubble and dissolve more rapidly. Even through the water, I could hear the same keening sound we'd heard outside, like the material was in pain. What did you add? Asked Dr. Chun. Just ordinary tap water with a higher concentration of a common bacterium, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. It's everywhere on Earth, in soil, in water, even on human skin. Completely harmless to us, but apparently devastating to them. Dr. Chun was already pulling out her own samples. We need to identify exactly which compounds are causing this reaction, if we can weaponize this. As they worked, Colonel Reeves took me aside. There's something else you should see. She led me to another room where a young woman sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in what looked like meditation. There was something odd about her, a faint luminescence to her skin that didn't seem entirely natural. This is Run, the colonel said quietly. She showed up at our perimeter yesterday, claiming the aliens are looking specifically for her. At first, we thought she was in shock, but then she started describing the inside of their ships in perfect detail. Things no human should know. Ren's eyes snapped open at the sound of our voices. They were startling, deep violet with flecks of gold. You were on the hillside, she said, looking directly at me. I saw you collecting samples. They saw you too. They're coming. Who's coming? I asked, try to ignore the chill running down my spine. The harvesters, she replied. That's what they call themselves. They've been watching Earth for thousands of years. I know because I'm... She hesitated, part of them. Or I was. Colonel Reeves put a hand on her sidearm, though she didn't draw it. Rin claims she was embedded on Earth 26 years ago. Says she was supposed to prepare the way, but chose to warn us instead. My mind struggled to process this. You're saying she's... An alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. One of the soldiers burst into the room. Colonel, they found us. Multiple bioforms approaching from the north tunnel. They'll breach the outer doors in minutes. Rin stood in one fluid motion. They're not here for you. They're here for me, and for what I stole. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystalline object that pulsed with an inner light. What is that? I whispered, unable to look away from the hypnotic pulsing. The reason they came to Earth, she said. The key to their entire invasion. The facility shook as something massive struck the outer doors. Over the intercom, someone shouted that the aliens were using some kind of acid to eat through the reinforced steel. Colonel Reeves made a quick decision. Chun, take your samples and head for the south exit with the first evacuation group. We need that research to continue. She turned to me. You go with Run through the east tunnel. Whatever that thing is, we can't let them get it back. Run grabbed my hand, her touch unnaturally warm. There's something else you need to know, she said as we ran. The human DNA in their soldiers? It's not just random sampling. They're looking for specific genetic markers. Descendants of those they left behind the last time they were here. People like me, and like you. Before I could process what she was saying, the wall beside us exploded inward. Through the dust and debris, I saw 3 of the biomechanical creatures crawling through, their movements more frantic than before. When they spotted Run, they froze for a split second, then charged straight for us. Rin pushed the crystal into my hands. Run. Don't let them take it. It controls their entire fleet. I hesitated, unwilling to leave her to face these creatures alone. Geo, she shouted, her eyes flaring with that unnatural violet light. As I turned to run, I saw her raise her hands toward the approaching aliens. The air between them began to shimmer and distort, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The aliens slowed, as if pushing against an invisible barrier. The last thing I heard as I sprinted down the tunnel was Ren's voice in my head, though her lips hadn't moved. Find the others like us. They're the only ones who can end this. I ran through the dim tunnel, the crystal pulsing brighter in my hand, as if responding to my racing heartbeat. Behind me, the sounds of conflict echoed. Screeching aliens shouted orders, and something else, a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Whatever Ren was doing to hold them back, it wasn't going to last long. The tunnel forked ahead. I paused, gasping for breath, trying to remember the evacuation routes Colonel Reeves had briefly shown us. Left or right? The decision could mean life or death. The crystal suddenly flared in my palm, its light casting strange shadows down the right passage. Was it guiding me? I didn't have time to question it. I took the right tunnel. For 3 days, I'd been reacting to events beyond my understanding. An ordinary chemistry teacher caught in an extraterrestrial invasion. Now, I was running through underground tunnels with alien technology, apparently carrying something that could determine the fate of humanity. And according to Run, I might not be entirely human myself. The tunnel opened into an abandoned subway station. I climbed onto the platform, the crystal's light reflecting off the grimy tiles. The city above must have been under alien control for days, but down here it was eerily quiet. A distant rumble suggested the fighting continued elsewhere. My phone buzzed, an unexpected surprise since most networks had gone down during the invasion. It was a text from an unknown number, head north. 3rd Street entrance. Blue van. Dr. C. Dr. Chun had made it out. I felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by suspicion. How'd she got my number? Could this be an alien trap? I stared at the message, then at the crystal in my hand. Its pulsing had slowed, becoming more regular like a heartbeat. It didn't feel threatening. It felt familiar. I followed the subway tunnel north, emerging cautiously from street entrance. The city was unrecognizable. Alien ships hovered overhead, their undersides now showing the same spreading corrosion we'd observed earlier. The closest ship emitted a constant low moan, like metal under stress. Buildings had been reduced to rubble in some blocks, while others stood untouched. The streets were eerily empty of people. I spotted the blue van idling at the corner. As I approached, the driver's window lowered slightly. Dr. Chen's face appeared, tense but alive. Quickly, she whispered, reaching to unlock the passenger door. I climbed in, clutching the crystal close. What happened to the others? Colonel Reeves? Run. Dr. Chen pulled away from the curb, driving slowly to avoid drawing attention. The colonel was covering our escape when I last saw her. She's highly capable. As for Rin, she glanced at me. What is she exactly? And what is that thing you're holding? I looked down at the crystal. Its pulsing had synchronized with my heartbeat perfectly now. Rin said it controls their fleet somehow. And she said I'm connected to them. That they left people behind last time they were here. People with specific genetic markers. Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. That would explain the test we ran on your blood sample. My blood sample? When did you? While you were sleeping at the facility. Standard procedure for everyone who joined us. She turned down a side street, heading toward the outskirts of the city. Your DNA has anomalies I've never seen before. Similar to what we found in the alien soldier, but more integrated. My mind reeled with implications. So, I really am part alien? How is that possible? I have parents, a family history. The changes are subtle. They could have been introduced generations ago, dormant until now. Dr. Chen glanced at me. When the crystal reacts to you, does it feel random or purposeful? I hesitated. Purposeful. Like it's communicating something, but I don't understand the language. She nodded as if this confirmed a theory. We think their technology is partly biological, partly psychic. It might be responding to your genetic signature. We drove in silence for several minutes, weaving through abandoned streets. In the distance, a ship suddenly tilted in the sky, one side of its hull dissolving visibly even from this distance. It began a slow, agonizing descent toward the ground. Our theory was right, Dr. Chin said. The bacteria in our water is killing them. Their biological technology has no defense against Earth's microbiome. Nature's fighting back. Is that why they're here? To fix their vulnerability? No. A new voice spoke from behind me. I turned to find Rin crouched in the back of the van, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They're here because of what's inside you. Inside all the descendants. I nearly jumped out of my skin. How did you? I followed your signal, she said, pointing at the crystal. We're connected to it, all of us with the modified genes. Dr. Chin kept her eyes on the road, but her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Where are we going exactly? Rin leaned forward. Mount Weather, the old government facility. There are others gathering there, more descendants like us. The resistance has established a base. You said they left people behind, I said. When? What? 5,000 years ago. The harvesters seed planets with their genetic material, then return when the hybrid population reaches sufficient numbers. They need our bodies, our adaptive biology that can survive on Earth. A chill ran through me. They're here to harvest us? Like crops. Your bodies. Your minds. Ren's voice grew hollow. They can't survive here in their true form. The water, the bacteria, it destroys them. But human bodies with their genetic modifications can house their consciousness. That's what they've been waiting for. Enough suitable hosts. Dr. Chun accelerated, swerving around an abandoned car. And this crystal? What is it? A quantum entanglement node. It coordinates their hive mind across their fleet. Without it, they can't communicate effectively between ships. That's why they want it back, I realized. And that's why their attack patterns have seemed less coordinated since you took it. Rin nodded. But it's more than that. In the right hands, our hands, it can be reprogrammed. The crystal pulsed faster in my grip, as if responding to her words. Strange symbols began to appear within its translucent structure, glowing and shifting. It's activating, Rin whispered, her eyes widening. They've initiated the final phase. The sky outside darkened suddenly, as if a storm was gathering. But this was no natural weather pattern. The alien ships were moving into a new formation, clustering together directly above us. They've tracked the crystal, Rin said. They know exactly where we are. Dr. Chun floored the accelerator. How far to Mount Weather? Not far enough, Rin replied. We won't make it before they intercept us. I stared at the crystal, watching the symbols shift and change. Something about them seemed almost readable now, as if a part of my brain was beginning to translate. What happens if I try to communicate with it? Could I send them false information? Rin's eyes locked with mine. It's dangerous. Your mind isn't trained for direct interface. It could overwhelm you. Do we have another choice? The van swerved violently as something struck the road ahead of us. Through the windshield, I saw one of the biomechanical creatures land in our path, followed by another and another. Dr. Chin spun the wheel, taking us off-road. No time for debate, she shouted. If you can do something with that crystal, do it now. I closed my eyes and focused on the crystal, feeling its warmth spread up my arm. The symbols inside it spun faster, and suddenly I could sense them. Thousands of alien minds linked together, their thoughts alien, but somehow decipherable. They were searching, hunting, coordinating their attack. And now they sense me too. A pressure built inside my head, like a migraine, but more targeted, a deliberate probe. They were trying to access my mind through the crystal. I instinctively pushed back, imagining a wall between us. Don't fight it. Ren's voice seemed to come from both inside and outside my head. Guide it. The crystal responds to your genetic signature. You have more control than they do right now. I relaxed my mental defenses slightly, not blocking them, but redirecting the way you might divert stream. I pictured the alien consciousness flowing past me rather than through me. The symbols in the crystal reorganized, responding to my intent. I could feel the alien minds recoiling in surprise, then surging back with greater force. The pressure in my head intensified until I felt blood trickling from my nose. "It's working," Rin whispered, her hand now on my shoulder. "Keep going." The van lurched again as Dr. Chun took us through rough terrain. I caught glimpses of trees through the windows. We'd reached the edge of a forest. The alien ships still loomed overhead, but they seemed to be moving erratically now, as if confused. I pushed deeper into the crystal's network, no longer directing but commanding. With each mental push, I could feel the alien coordination fracturing. Ship communications were failing. Their hive mind was splintering, but the effort was taking its toll. My vision blurred, and the pain in my head became nearly unbearable. I felt something warm running from my ears now, too. More blood. "You need to stop," Dr. Chen called out. "It's killing you." "Not yet," I gasped. Almost there. I could see it now, the master control node. The central point where all their communications converged. If I could just reach it, disrupt it. The crystal suddenly blazed with blinding light. I felt a rush of alien consciousness flood into me, too powerful to redirect. Thousands of alien minds crashed through my mental barriers, their thoughts overwhelming mine. And in that moment of connection, I saw their true purpose. The invasion, the harvesting, it was all a lie. What they really wanted was... The van screeched to a halt. Through my pain-blurred vision, I saw why. Blocking the road ahead stood a line of human figures, but their movements were wrong, jerky and uncoordinated. Their eyes glowed with the same violet light as Ren's. "Oh God," Dr. Chen whispered. "They've already started." One of the figures stepped forward. To my horror, I recognized Colonel Reeves, but her face was expressionless, her eyes glowing violet. "Give us the crystal," she said in a voice that wasn't entirely her own. "It belongs to us." Ren's grip tightened on my shoulder. "Don't listen. That's not the Colonel anymore." The crystal pulsed violently in my hand, and I felt something changing inside me. The alien presence in my mind wasn't retreating, it was adapting, merging. And in that moment of integration, I suddenly understood what the crystal really was and what I needed to do with it. I raised my hand, the crystal blazing like a miniature sun between my fingers. "You're right," I said to the thing wearing Colonel Reeves's body. "It does belong to you. So take it back." And before Ren or Dr. Chan could stop me, I focused every ounce of my will into the crystal and sent a single, overwhelming command to every ship in the alien fleet. The crystal shattered in my hand, fragments scattering like stars. Above us, the alien ships froze in midair, and then the sky began to fall. The world didn't end with a bang, but with a chorus of crashes as alien ships plummeted from the sky. Some disintegrated midair, their biological components dissolving into mist before they hit the ground. Others crashed into open fields or forests, purposely avoiding populated areas, their final act of what I can only describe as mercy. I woke up 3 days later in a makeshift hospital at Mount Weather. My head felt as if it had been split open and carefully stitched back together. In many ways, it had been. "You shouldn't have survived that," Dr. Chen said when she visited my bedside. Dark circles hung under her eyes, but she was smiling. The amount of neural connection that crystal established should have fried your brain. Instead, it reconfigured you. Reconfigured? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Your genetic anomalies have fully activated. You're the first successful human harvester hybrid. At least, the first one on our side." I tried to sit up. "Colonel Reeves? The others who were taken?" Dr. Chen's smile faded. "Some we managed to save. The connection was severed when you destroyed the crystal. Those who weren't fully integrated returned to normal, though they don't remember much. Others were too far gone. And run." Dr. Chen looked away. "She used the last of her energy to protect you when the crystal shattered. The feedback would have killed you otherwise." The grief felt unexpectedly personal for someone I'd barely known. "She saved us all, didn't she?" "Yes, and so did you." Over the following weeks, as I recovered, the full picture emerged. When I shattered the crystal, I hadn't just disrupted their communications. I'd sent a command. The aliens' consciousness returned to their home fleet in orbit, abandoning their invasion ships. And just before the connection broke completely, I'd glimpsed their true purpose. They weren't invading Earth to harvest us, I explained to the Recovery Council. They were running from something. Something worse, something that destroyed their home world. They needed our bodies to survive, but they also needed our help. Against what? Asked one of the scientists. I don't know exactly. Something that consumes entire star systems. They called it the Void. Earth changed after the invasion. The fallen alien ships provided technology beyond our understanding, but also a warning of what lay beyond our solar system. Humanity united in a way I never thought possible, working to understand the alien tech while preparing for whatever might follow the harvesters to our world. The hybrid genes weren't a mistake or a cruel experiment. They were a lifeline, a way for two species to survive together. Those of us with activated genes became interpreters, bridges between human and alien knowledge. 1 year after the invasion, standing on that same hillside where Dr. Chun and I had first discovered the aliens' weakness, I watched the sun set over the recovered city. New structures rose among the old, buildings that incorporated salvaged alien technology designed to work with Earth's environment rather than against it. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chun. Signal detected from deep space. Harvester origin. Translation needed. I took a deep breath of Earth's air, rich with the very microbes that had inadvertently saved us. The aliens had launched their assault, but overlooked the planet's most fundamental defense, life itself, in its smallest form, protecting its home. As I headed back to the research center, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The invasion had failed because the aliens ignored one crucial detail. The planet was Earth, with all its messy, microscopic, magnificent life. And now, that very life might be the key to facing whatever darkness was coming next. The crystal fragments we'd recovered were already growing, reforming. Earth was preparing for a new chapter, not just survival, but something greater. A story that, for better or worse, I would help write. They had come to take our world, but instead, they gave us the universe.